Good afternoon. I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., President and CEO of Black Enterprise. And it is my privilege to welcome you to our inaugural Black Enterprise Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. It has been 9 months since the world witnessed global unrest over racial inequities sparked by the tragic death of George Floyd. It has been 9 months of verbal commitments from corporate America to address racial inequality and provide unfettered access to career advancement and business opportunities. And it has been 9 months of unprecedented focus on the progress of upwardly mobility for Blacks who continue to be largely excluded from boardroom and C-suite leadership. At this crucial inflection point, we believed it was vital for Black Enterprise to fully explore DE&I initiatives as it pertains to African American representation within corporate America. As such, we have assembled a powerhouse slate of keynote speakers and presenters to fully dissect and make actionable recommendations on issues that represent the critical nature of our times, as well as an enlightened pathway towards our business future. Over the next few hours, the foremost Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officers and other leading industry experts will discuss a wide range of relevant topics, including the state of DE&I efforts in the COVID-19 era, the outcomes of corporate racial equity pledges, and the true impact of employee resource groups. Our summit not only examines the renewed focus on Black recruitment, retention, and advancement in corporate America, but also how these corporations plan to ensure intentional, measurable, and systemic results. Before we officially kick off our summit, I would like to extend our appreciation to our sponsors, AT&T, Fidelity, and Toyota, for making an investment in this exclusive virtual summit for professionals of color. Most importantly, I want to thank all of you, our audience, for joining us in this important dialogue on today's rapidly changing landscape. So let's begin the conversations on our journey to provide Black professionals with unlimited access to career advancement and business opportunities. Welcome.
Thanks, Butch. Hi, I'm Derek T. Dingle, Chief Content Officer at Black Enterprise. Let's kick off our DEI Summit with our first session, our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officers Roundtable, DEI and the New Normal, hosted by Toyota. To discuss the timely and relevant topic, we have assembled the foremost leaders driving such efforts at their corporations, all of which have been included on the Black Enterprise list of the 50 best companies for diversity. Our roundtable participants are Sandra Phillips Rogers, Group Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, and Chief Diversity Officer, Toyota Motor North America; Cynthia H. Bowman, Chief Diversity and Inclusion and Talent Acquisition Officer, Bank of America; and Carla Grant-Pickens, Vice President, Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, IBM. Ladies, welcome. I think this is, we're going to have a great session. It's a timely topic. We're going to talk about where diversity, equity, and inclusion is in our current environment. And a lot has happened over the last year. We've been hit with the twin pandemics, one of COVID-19 and then one of systemic racism, and that has been addressed. So what I'd like all of you to do in terms of our first question is to share with us your role at your corporations. I know all of you deal with diversity and inclusion, but wanted to make sure our audience had some specifics in terms of the size of your portfolio and what you cover in those roles. And then share with us, what is DEI like in this new normal? How has DEI changed given the current developments? And I'm going to start with you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Derek, and welcome everyone. So first, just a little bit about my role. As you mentioned, I lead diversity and inclusion for the bank globally, as well as talent acquisition. So essentially, my role is to create an environment that looks like the world that we live in, and to drive a culture of inclusion where everyone can bring their whole self to work, but also have equal and equitable access to opportunity. From a talent acquisition perspective, I'm responsible for hiring the best of the best into our company every day. When you talk specifically about this past year in our current environment, look, the current global health crisis has had a disproportionate impact on people and community of color. We know that economic conditions, which are already precarious for people of color, have been exacerbated. And systemic barriers have been brought really into greater focus across the country, globally, and within our corporations. At Bank of America, we know these issues related to racial equality and economic opportunity are deeply connected. And where usually there are racial injustices, there's often a lack of economic mobility and vice versa. So this backdrop and these underlying issues aren't new. And given those circumstances, we knew we needed to double down our efforts last year because undoubtedly there was an urgency fueled by this moment. We also know through research that the ability to close the wealth gap can be influenced significantly through various areas. And that's why our CEO, Brian Moynihan, and our board of directors directed $1 billion. It's a 4-year commitment that we made last year to 4 key areas: healthcare, housing, jobs, and small businesses, all of those areas devoted to create opportunities for people and communities of color. So we really have had a longstanding commitment, Derek, around diversity and inclusion, but last year we knew it was time to really double down due to the disparate impacts, particularly for Black and Brown communities. And we're just committed to do our part as well as to do more in this moment.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sandra, can you share with us your portfolio and how DEI shows up at Toyota North America in the current environment?
So first of all, thank you, Derek, for having me, and thanks to Black Enterprise for hosting this important discussion. I'm so happy to be a part of it. So I am the Chief Diversity Officer at Toyota Motor North America. And so in that role, it is my responsibility to work with the company in North America to help maintain our commitments to diversity and inclusion. And that would include having an inclusive workforce, an engaged team member community that also includes our business partners, our dealers, our suppliers, as well as our community. I have an organization that reports up to me, Social Innovation, which is responsible for driving DE&I at Toyota. But for us, we believe that diversity and inclusion is a core pillar for us. It's a part of our Toyota way, respect for people. So it's ingrained in everything that we do. So Toyota has been moving along, as many companies have for many years, trying to put diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront of everything that it does. And prior to May of last year, Toyota had any number of partnerships with organizations like the Urban League, Rainbow Push, NAACP, community partners all across North America that are day-to-day working in the trenches to try to solve the problems of systemic racism and trying to bring opportunity, empowerment, and inclusion to our communities. And so when George Floyd was killed, along with Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, we sat back and said, this moment requires us to do even more. So the first thing we did is built on partnerships we had with some of the organizations that I just named, and went into the communities and tried to put additional resources to work in places that already had the tentacles, the type of framework to actually move into communities and help on economic empowerment, on some of the gaps in healthcare. The pandemic, I think, really set the stage for what happened later in the year, because it laid bare the disparities in health in our communities. And so when the racial injustice issues occurred and got to an inflection point with George Floyd, I think that got everybody's attention, really not only just in North America, but around the world. And so many companies like Toyota really mobilized and moved into action. And so what we did, first of all, it was important that we denounce the acts of violence, of bigotry, of prejudice, of racism, and make that clear. It was then important for us to let our team members know that we hear them, that we are ready to listen, and that we want to be a part of the solution. And then from there, we worked on a plan of action. Now, we are fortunate to have a diversity advisory board made up of professionals in diversity and inclusion from many various areas in corporate America. It's chaired by Secretary Alexis Herman. And so we got their best thinking. We got the best thinking of our suppliers and from our dealers and from our team members. And there we came up with a plan of action. Again, building on the work that we've been doing for many years, but with a specific focus for the time. So we came up really with 5 areas that we wanted to focus. Investments, advocacy, education, alignment with our business partners, and then team member engagement. And so, some of the things that we did, just to give you an example of it, when it came to advocacy, our team members wanted to mobilize and move forward. And so one of the things that we did is we worked really hard to get the Confederate symbol out of the Mississippi state flag, where we have a manufacturing plant there. We also sent letters to some of our legislators, encouraging them to support legislation to help eradicate systemic racism. These were the types of things that we could involve our team members in. We're trying to push in the few remaining states that don't have hate crime legislation. My legal team worked on an expunction program, to help those who have been successfully served criminal sentences have that removed from their records so that they can actually have a shot at gainful employment. Education, we had a lot of different speakers come in to help us have those difficult conversations. We had Emmanuel Acho come in, and he was just wonderful. And really, I think we've had conversations and discussions before, but this time it was very different. It was very pointed. In terms of investments, we had a $750 million DE&I bond from our financial services company that was staffed by diverse brokers to help move forward some of our bond work. So these were the types of things that we focused on. We wanted to hear from team members to make sure that they're okay, and what are some of the things that they see that we can make some progress on in the workplace to help them feel included and bring in their full selves to work. But one thing that we did, I think that was quite unique, we established a social justice advocacy committee that I chair. We'd actually stood it up before George Floyd's murder. And it served us well because it's comprised of all of the leaders of our various business functions, sales, manufacturing, financial services, human resources, government affairs, et cetera, legal. And that's a group that really helped come up with the framework for this plan of action. And so it's something that's really served us quite well. But I think everybody realized in this moment that more of us required. And I'm happy to say that we're meeting that challenge. Still more to do, but it's good to just see the focus and the intentionality of what we're doing. And I think it's really making a big difference.
Okay. Carla?
Yes.
Please share with us your focus and how DEI has changed at IABM over the past year.
Sure, Derek, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to Black Enterprise. So look, this has been a very important moment for all of us, and with our panelists, we've all been experiencing very similar challenges. So a lot of the themes are very familiar. Our DE&I organization for IBM, my role is responsible for diversity and inclusion globally across our 300,000 plus workforce across all of our countries. And the organization is responsible for our strategy, as well as execution of our goals across our units and our markets, and what our plans and programs are that we're going to execute against our strategy. We also have, which many organizations have, are our business resource groups, sometimes called ERGs, employee resource groups, that are really responsible for engaging our different networks, affinity groups, and communities to really showcase work that they're doing in their communities, but also within IBM, really to create that and foster that culture of inclusion. Additionally, my organization is responsible for our DE&I learning portfolio. That includes our training that we actually have for all of our employees that we deploy, which includes a portfolio and array of different training around inclusion and diversity topics. And we've just launched our Embrace Race learning offering, which goes into teaching about race, which we've done with some professors in academia. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then lastly, we really do focus in on analytics and cognitive solutions. We're a technology company. So we do focus in on how to use technology to inform decision support around hiring and around with our hiring managers and our leaders, just to ensure that we're creating and fostering an inclusive culture and diverse representation. So that's kind of what my role covers. Look, these crises have been so challenging for all of us. It's been a really important time at IBM, and we have reflected on who we are as a company, as leaders, as individuals, and we began the conversation immediately, like these other companies have. IBM asked our managers to reach out to our Black employees, to ask them, first and foremost, how are you doing? Listen to them, be empathetic, be compassionate, but also to find out what support that they needed. Both the pandemic and this race crisis has created opportunities for which we had to really show up differently as an organization. We also started with having what we call our Embrace Pledge. It was a pledge of all employees to our Black brothers and sisters at IBM, to support them during this difficult time. And that ended up being a really organic group of young and vibrant IBMers, Black IBMers, that came to us and said, we really need an agenda. We want to understand what's happening at IBM. We know that you're doing a lot of things, but we're just unaware. And so this really ended up being an opportunity to co-create with our employees. This was a moment in time that it wasn't leader-led, it was employee-led. And it started with our Embrace Race conversations that we did with all of our Black employees. And then that became a real organic way to have these conversations with our leaders leading and our teams, hearing about Black voices and hearing about the struggles and the challenges that we face in our community and how it shows up in the workplace and what we needed to do to be better. And so in our social justice agenda, we created 4 squads. One on advocacy, another was on representation and transparency, how we lead in good tech, and then really creating economic opportunity. So those were really the 4 key areas that we focused on. And that agenda ended up being a group of agile squads of IBMers and allies, Black IBMers and our allies, working together really closely to drive this change. And that was done with our CEO, Arvind Krishna. He sent the former president a letter to say that IBM wants to be an advocate. We want to use our brand, and we want to be able to really drive things that are going to be important to the Black community. And that meant skills and education, and jobs, so creating opportunity to change the socioeconomic circumstance of our community. It also meant being able to stand up and take down our facial recognition software for sale, because this has been used in the past as biased towards people of color. And we also believe that advocating for legislation around police reform is going to be an important initiative as well. So Derek, those are just a few examples of what we've been doing in this moment at IBM.
So all of your companies and you in terms of leading that charge have taken a holistic approach, an expansive approach. You know, how has been the efforts to communicate that to the public at large? I mean, one of the questions that is often stated is, how is this moment different? Do you feel that your stakeholders, and I'm going to start off with Cynthia, do you feel that your stakeholders are embracing that? Is there still some skepticism in terms of whether there's going to be a real environmental change, or do you feel that the stakeholders have been embracing of the changes and your communications efforts have been effective? Cynthia?
Absolutely. I think I'd have to answer that question both internally and externally, and I'll start with external first. I mean, certainly, I think that many individuals have been embracing the stories, whether it is investors, our stakeholders, our clients. Everyone is really looking toward to understand what companies in this moment are doing to address some broader issues, just not around our internal statistics and opportunities, but quite frankly, our commitments in the community. And that's why it's been really important to elevate the story right now, double down on those commitments, and continue to educate people on the ways that we're driving change. Specifically around the $1 billion effort that we started over the last 4 years, we're sharing more examples of some of the things that we have done since the announcement last year. One example last month was we announced approximately $150 million in investments in 40 private funds focused on minority entrepreneurs, along with the completion of 12 equity investments in minority deposited institutions and what we know as CDFIs, or community development financial institutions. Strategic philanthropy, Derek, also supports this work. In 2020, we made a $1 million grant, for instance, to the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. That was in support of Greenwood Rising, which is the state-of-the-art history center located in the heart of Tulsa's Greenwood district, honoring the legacy of Black Wall Street. So those are just some examples that we continue to engage with our investors, our stakeholders, and our clients, because I think this topic is very important and has been elevated in terms of discussions over the past year, more than ever than I've seen since I've been in this role. With that being said, I want to turn my focus a little bit to internally as well. And similar to other speakers, I mean, we've done so much, I think, with our own employees, anything from an internal site that basically was entitled, "I'm Not Okay." We thought it was important for members of our community, Black, African American, others, to just really reflect on this moment and how they're feeling in an environment that creates empathy and understanding around difference. We also hosted a series of courageous conversations. We've been doing these conversations since 2014, so this was not new. But after the murder of George Floyd, and as Sandra mentioned, too many unfortunate others towards the end of last year, we started elevating those conversations just on race. And so we engaged over 165,000 employees across the bank towards the end of last year on courageous conversations, let's get real sessions, walk a mile in my shoes sessions that really, again, were designed to create empathy and understanding around difference. And one of the things that I found so incredibly promising is that even in this year, when you look at our diversity inclusion index, which measures people's perceptions around truly bringing their whole self to work, having equitable access to opportunity, our results were the highest that they've ever been, and continue to increase year over year over year. And I think the reason that we saw that is because of the culture internally that really allowed voices to be heard, perspectives to be understood, and have some level of internal debate on the current reality, because a lot of the issues that impact our people, they don't end when they walk into the four walls of our company. And it's important to acknowledge these topics both internally and externally. to really drive more understanding and ultimately more progress.
Does a remote scenario, a remote situation that we've been in, does that create a barrier to communications, or does that heighten communication?
Now, as an example, we had a session on Thursday for Black History Month, and it was really around the broader issues around women and health, particularly around Black African American women. That session, we had over 3,600 people join. And so I think the nature is that by leveraging technology, we can create a platform where we are actually broadening the conversation. And the scores were incredibly positive around the number of people we're reaching on relevant topics, because we know the disparity around healthcare, particularly for women of color and for Black women, is a real and challenging issue. So we wanted to elevate that conversation and talk about things that we can all do to drive change.
So Sandra, has as Cynthia talked about, have you found that the technology has facilitated the communications with the workers at IBM? Have you been able to have more robust conversations, and how has that impacted the effectiveness of the organizational efforts of ERGs and having allies, creating greater allyship within the organization?
Derek, like Cynthia, I would say that while these topics are very personal to people, and there were times when I wish I could be in a room and kind of put my arms around them and or at least, being more close physical proximity, I would say that the trade-off actually has been pretty good. For many of our speaker series, we've had, at a height, 2,500 team members participate. And when you think about it, sometimes that's hard to facilitate because you don't even have a room that's big enough to house that many team members. But then when you think about, we're, all over the United States and, 10 manufacturing plants in the US alone, when you have, Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever you use, you're getting in more team members to participate. And I think that's been extraordinarily important. I also think, just from a logistics standpoint, some of these speakers like Emmanuel Acho, we had Dr. Bernice King for our MLK Day program, and we're going to have Brian Stevenson this week, which I'm really excited about. It's hard for these giants to take the time to travel. So I think it's been very good. We've had like coffees, teas. We've had all manner of, Free Talk Friday. We do that at 4 o'clock every Friday. We weren't doing that before. So I think it's been good in that regard. We have had to, make wellness checks on our team members. And there's something called Mendomi. It's a Japanese word. It means caring for others, as if they're part of the family. And so when we were down for almost 6 weeks in our production facilities, the leaders of the plants actually called every single team member each day to just say, how are you doing? How's the family holding up? And that's something that I don't think we'll lose when we can finally get at least the pandemic in the rearview mirror. I think it's created a whole new culture of how we communicate and how we care and how we're intentional. I'll just say, in terms of communication, our team members made it clear to us that, yes, it's important to talk about what you're going to do, but it's important to demonstrate with actions. And so, one of the things we did is we got in touch with our local leaders. I'll just speak here in North Texas, but it happened across the US. And there were dialogues with city leaders, leaders in policing, because that was really one of the first questions that team members had is what's going on in our community relative to policing? And so we could participate in that virtually, and we had hundreds of team members dial in for that. I don't think we would have had that if we had not been in this pandemic phase. But, whether we were reaching out to our dealer body and trying to come up with new targets for minority dealers coming in each year into our partnership, whether we were actually out in the community or our business partnering groups, we're trying to find ways to advocate and make change with some of the community organizations that our team members selected themselves that they really wanted to help support. All of these things spoke volumes around what Toyota's commitments and intentions are at this time. You can go big, but then I think our global president always says, best in town. That's the focus, best in town. And so what do you do locally? How do you make progress with your communities? We do a lot with the Dallas Regional Chamber. They had pledges on commitments to trying to help eradicate and mitigate systemic racism, whether it's improvements in policing or economic empowerment. We try to lend our voice, and we have lent our voice in those spaces. And I think that's what 2020 is going to tell us all, that it's important to be good corporate citizens where you live and work, and that you can do a lot to support the work of other really great organizations. And I'm so glad to see the injection of funds that have gone to, historically Black colleges and universities. They've been starving for that type of support, and now they're getting it. So there's a lot of good that's come out of this. And I do think it will lead to sustainable change. Time will tell, but I certainly believe that.
Yeah, that's the one challenge that I get from our audience is, how do you make this lasting? I mean, and right now, because of the pandemic, a number of people, do communicate virtually. But once we go post-pandemic and people start going to their offices, and there are other distractions other than the focus on the pandemic and being together, and we go back to, maybe we never go back to the new normal, but we go back to a shift, then we will see a difference in terms of the communications and the connection with employees and other stakeholders. Carla, is that something that you're addressing, making sure that we can maintain the policies? And then with that, looking at African American employees, obviously Black enterprise, our focus is on Black employees. How do you make sure that you promote, have representation within IBM at all levels? Whether you're talking about entering the corporation as a new professional or looking at the C-suite.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. So yeah, we are in this moment, as the other panelists have stated, where this tech reach has really provided us opportunity for, our employees to really be able to participate in maybe programs that they may not have been able to in the past. Like we've had Mark Morial, who was our speaker for Black History Month. This was an opportunity for him to come and speak to Black employees, but this issue around Black America became a real human rights issue for many IBMers around the world. And so we had Black IBMers and allies joining from around the world, Afro-Brazilians, Costa Ricans who are Black. We had our Black communities across all of Europe and the UK. We had our countries across Africa. So we really did have a lot of interest in what we were doing in this space, but how to engage as a company. And we had all of our different groups, all of our different affinity groups to also engage with the intersectionality of our veterans community, our Asian community hosting sessions, and Hispanic community, because we share a lot of these issues, not only as women, but people of color, but across our diverse communities and groups. So we found this as a great opportunity to be able to scale our programs in this virtual world and to really get to these topics more broadly with some of the great leaders we've had to come to really help really educate us as we grow on this path. Now, around our programs and around our career velocity for our employees and building our pipeline, Derek, this is such a great question. And so, as the other speakers stated, we've been at this for a long time, but we wanted to do some resets after last year. So we've had our P-Tech program, which is a free digital education platform in the workplace to build digital skills in AI and cloud computing, cybersecurity, design thinking, professional skills. And we're in a decade of this program. It's been a great program that we've been doing with our industry partners as well. And it's really to build the tech skills that you need for the workforce. We have over 150,000 students globally in this program. And we decided last year in September, we were going to double down on this program, doubling the number of schools in the US. We want to have a P-Tech school in every state. We're about halfway there, with multiple states having multiple P-Tech schools. We also want to be able to, and we've already announced that we're going to do 1,000 internships with our P-Tech students. So that'll help them to get the skills they need in a job environment. So that on-the-job training and that skills experience with the things that they're learning with our digital education. We also launched the first of its kind Quantum Education and Research Initiative with 13 HBCUs. Traditionally, HBCUs have not been granted the opportunity to do research around technology and to get research type of grants. And so we've selected 13 schools, and we've actually invited all of our HBCUs to participate in our Skills Academy. And that's a $100 million investment so that they can develop, again, these skills around AI and technology, all the STEM areas. And then these 13 universities chosen for quantum research, that's to also provide them with an opportunity for their students to do research type of projects. Again, building the skills that they need so that they can really publish the great work and really change the world. And so those are just a couple of examples of some of our programs that we really have either doubled down on or invested in. We have many, many more, but you're right. You know, this is really about building the pipeline from high school, building the pipeline in colleges across all of our universities. About 35% of our IBMers, Black IBMers, come from HBCUs, but the other 60-ish% comes from predominantly white institutions. So we have to really provide a pathway of access to come to IBM. We announced our IBM Accelerate program, where Black employees can engage with us freshman, sophomore year. We've just launched that so that they could do our digital academy and then come and intern with us. Because if we can touch students from 9th grade all the way through college, and then come and work at IBM as an intern or apprentice, or align them with a partner, even if they don't choose us, they're building the skills they need that are really gonna be able to give them the readiness to really, really take hold and shape of their careers and be confident that they can succeed. And so we are doing that through the universities. We're doing that through the high school programs, building the pipeline. We have an early professional hire program that's also non-degree. You can come in as a professional hire, an apprentice, and learn and grow. And then we ensure through mentorship, sponsorship, and we also have Black journey experiences our leaders can also have through our Building Relationships and Influence class, which we host for Black women, to build the pipeline for leaders for executive positions. We have a leadership program that's around technical talent, so that we're building technical talent around our diverse constituencies. And then we also are building, and we have a program that we are launching for executive career velocity, ensure that our executives have sponsorship. And although you become an executive, you can continuously grow. And we ensure that we have representation at our board, at our executive leadership team, across the executive roles, and then across our technical leadership and managerial roles. And then you have your pipeline that you're building for the future. So you're right, this is so important that we do this across all the roles for which we have for all to be able to see themselves at all levels. And that's what the new generation wants to see, is they want to be able to see an organization that's not just going to have entry-level hires, but they're going to have people that are going to be representative that look like them at all levels of the organization. And so that's where we're focused.
Oh, thank you, Carla. Cynthia, Bank of America has always had a early identification program in terms of talent. Share with us how that program or that process extends to management, middle management, senior management, and possibly C-suite management.
Yeah, I mean, so we have our human capital report, which was recently updated last October. And in that report, it shares our diversity statistics, to your point, Derek, from the board all the way down to entry-level hires for interns as well as for full-time hires. And one of the things that we did last year, to be very specific, was included 2 historic underrepresented groups. So we also have specifics. We historically show people of color, but we added Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino for each and every one of those areas. And then we showed our progress over time. And what you'll see in that report is that we've made progress on all fronts over time, specifically for the Black African American population. Our hiring practice too specifically has resulted in a population that is over 45% racially or ethnically diverse, as well as 13% Black African American. And we've achieved that through a lot of different areas. In addition to our campus hiring that you just mentioned, lateral hiring specifically, targeted efforts internally around elevating talent into more senior level positions, focusing on our manager population, because that's the pipeline of leadership, focusing on 3 deep from the CEO, which we share those statistics as well in our human capital report for our Black African American communities. We also listed just several partnerships, like the targeted partnership with 11 community colleges, 6 HBCUs, and 4 HSIs that are all designed to help students of color complete the education and training necessary to be successful in our workforce. We share our campus statistics where we hire relative to what the world looks like. So we're also bringing in strong representation of Black African American talent from campuses and universities, particularly with a strong focus on HBCUs. Since 2005, we've seen an increase in representation of Black African Americans at level 1 through 3, an increase of 50%, 13% increase in manager representation. And so we really think that it's important to not only put programs in place, but to be honest, we're not at a loss of programs. We need to drive progress through accountability and holding leadership accountable for results. And we think by having transparency of our numbers in our report, having specific transparency around the Black African American population across multiple levels, that it holds us accountable not only to our shareholders, but to our employees and to our clients. Because you can't move what you can't measure. And we think that data is foundational. And we believe that the routine disclosure of our workforce diversity metrics will hold our management team accountable and ensures that we're all delivering on our commitment to increase representation, Derek, but just not at entry level, across all levels of the organization.
Yeah, that's the key. We've seen a number of programs, and they've been outlined about the entry-level professional program. But the focus, and what we've been focusing on at Black Enterprise a great deal is what is happening with the C-suite track, because we've seen the C-suite track, retrenchment in that area, and there hasn't been much discussion in this new era about how are we going to build up those numbers, how are we going to eventually, and I know this is a board function, but look at a pipeline so that when the board looks at CEO succession planning or CFO succession planning, they have a ready bench of top performers that can fill those slots or at least be considered for those slots. Is that a part of the identification program as well? Identifying that talent that can get those C-suite positions?
Absolutely. Our talent planning process have always included a focus on diversity. And so when you look across the processes that we do at CEO level, at line of business level, we look specifically at the rate of talent that is identified in critical roles as talent as successors. D&I is in every business review discussion. It's not a separate dialogue. It's in every management team meeting when we meet up every month to look at our metrics. We look at all metrics. So as I mentioned, it's not only the top roles, it is 3D from the CEO. To your point, those are the positions that you're talking about. It is the management population. And then we look at for every level, how key levers, the way you drive representation is either you're going to increase hiring, you're going to increase promotions, or you're going to retain who you have. The levers are not complicated. But they have to be measured diligently and consistently to understand where you're in positions of strength and where you have areas of opportunity so that your accountability plans really help you to drive progress over time. And Derek, that has to be at every level, and it has to be embedded in how you make decisions. We have a document called D&I Everywhere. It's every critical decision that you make around talent, from hiring all the way to recognition and retention. And it basically identifies key levers that must be in place, quite frankly, to have more of a routine, project managed way of identifying diversity, how you embed them in key processes that where decisions get made so that the outcomes are more inclusive versus less inclusive.
So Sandra, in terms of looking at the future diversity efforts, I think it's important to look at how your company, as well as the other companies that are represented here, can influence the industry. I mean, your companies are, have these expansive programs, you're focused on different areas, but, obviously we have to focus on how we can have a mass impact. So in terms of Toyota's leadership, what have Toyota done? What has, say, the Diversity Council done to make this more industry-wide or, to make it more expansive in terms of these efforts across corporate America?
Derek, just for kind of context, Edelman had a survey last year, and it said that more than 70% of those who responded look to their companies for guidance and direction on diversity and inclusion. And the survey also said that companies that focus more on what they can do to advance social justice will do better. And so I think that sets out the backdrop to make the case for why diversity and inclusion is so critically important. Again, I think we look for opportunities to be leaders wherever we are. And so when you look at our dealer body, there's a council of our minority dealers, and we try to work with them on ways to bring in very talented up-and-coming dealers through an academy that would actually give them more skills and training to be able to be in a position to get a dealership when one becomes available. That's something that's cross-industry, of which we have participated in for a number of years. And that's the type of leadership that we want to try to establish in the automotive industry. Another place where we've tried to take a leadership role is with NASCAR. And I think everyone remembers a lot of the things that happened last year around, disabling the Confederate flag. Our role there was one to offer support and to try to say to others, this is, Toyota doesn't stand for this. And now, we're fortunate enough to be working with Bubba Wallace, who was at the forefront of that effort, and Michael Jordan, and they now have their own racing team with Denny Hamlin, one of our longtime drivers. I think that was a great example of Toyota taking a stand and actually going further, but to impact change in a way that I think has the potential to just change NASCAR all together in terms of the fan base, the more inclusiveness that I think fans who maybe heretofore really hadn't connected with. So that's that. I think the last piece that I will mention, Derek, is what we're doing with diverse suppliers. We are a member of the $1 Billion Club, and I'm sure my colleagues on the panel are as well, where we're committing to significant spend each year in our supply base. But, we go further than that. We have opportunity exchanges every year where minority and other diverse suppliers can come and have a chance to show us, show the whole industry what they can do. And we sponsor that. We bring all of that in-house so that we can create opportunities, not only to increase the number of suppliers that work with us, but position them to increase their opportunities with other automotive manufacturers in the industry. So I think there's an opportunity to be a convener, and I think that's where we see ourselves. There's an opportunity to take stands that are in alignment with our cultural priorities for respect for people, and we do that. But, we talked a little bit about it before, but working on getting this next generation interested in STEM and technology is so critically important. We've got programs here in the North Texas area, Southern Dallas, West Dallas, with high schools, to get these students prepared and ready to go for a STEM career. We've got internships across the U.S. that focus on that. We've got a Fab Lab, which is a kind of manufactured trailer on one of our Toyota Tundras, where students can go in and work with laser, printers to do some amazing things. So we're trying to bring solutions to communities in a mobile fashion that really demonstrate, hey, we need bright minds and innovative talent, and we want to be a part of that solution. And so I think that what 2020 has taught us, if not prior to 2020, that we have to find ways to lean in. And that may mean something very different across industries and across companies. But wherever we can make an impact, that impact is going to add up and multiply. I can't tell you, the other hat I wear is legal, how much of what we're doing to try to increase diversity among our outside law firm partners, and how that's now a model that other companies can follow. That's what this is about. Collectively, we can do a lot. And so I'm so pleased to be a part of a company that really focuses on how can we be part of the solution, both internally and in the communities in which we live and work.
So it's about leadership and partnership in order to have mass impact. Cynthia, you were going to raise a point.
Yeah, look, one of the points Sandra made, I think, is really key. She talks about the need to lean in. I do think that there are several corporations who've been leaning in for a really long time. And yes, we are doubling down and doing more. One of the things I heard last year when we were having our Courageous Conversation series from a lot of our employees who weren't directly impacted by sort of what was going on, but yet indirectly, as we know, we saw people coming together across all races to really say no more last year. But one of the things I heard was, I don't know what to say. I'm afraid to speak up. And what we try to do is tell people it's time to break the silence, to your point of leaning in. We need individuals across the globe saying no more and making this more than a moment in time, but a movement. So we created this guide called Let's Get Real. It was an individual guide for how to engage in conversations on tough topics. We know they're not easy, but they are necessary topics for us to really unpack, understand history, and really decide how to move forward. But what I loved about it is we gave people common language to use, what to say. We told people what not to say or not to do. Like, don't just listen to reply, but listen to really understand. or we told people things don't do, like don't say, I don't see color. I'm proud of who I am. I want you to see me for who I am. That's a part of accepting difference and diversity in this world. And then we gave them all kind of resources to leverage. But it was important to have the necessary conversation that silence, and sometimes, in many cases, is condoning what is happening in this world. And we need everyone, including larger majority populations, to get engaged, to get proximate, as Brian Stevens would say, and to take personal accountability to doing something to make this a more equitable world we live in. It might not be a protest if that's not your thing, but it could be addressing an inappropriate joke. It could be advocating for that voice in the meeting that is being overlooked. It could be giving credit back to someone whose idea was taken and repackaged and put under someone else's idea overall. And so I think it's really important on this lean-in topic to have the broader conversations of everyone's responsibility, just not our CEOs, just not our biggest executives, just not our corporations, but really leaning into this topic in this particular moment, so this becomes more of a movement and we see a broader groundswell of change and advocacy in the world we live in.
Yeah, and Carla, I'd like you to join in here. But how do you help, employees, especially those at the lower levels, those who feel, not fully connected or empowered to find their voice, to feel empowered to challenge the status quo, so to speak?
Yeah, and quite frankly, we haven't had that problem. Our employees have been very vocal, which has been a great thing. But for those that may not have their voice, you're right. It's really, really important that we provide these spaces and places that are safe and supportive so their voices can be heard. So we continue with our town halls. We have had a town hall every month last year, and we've moved them to every couple of months this year with the Black community. We have an SVP sponsor of that group that leads those discussions. We invite them all and allies. We also use community channels. So we use Slack within our organization. So the Black community is able to communicate with everyone on a daily basis, give their point of view, talk about what's happening. And that's another great channel. We also co-created with our employees with our social justice agenda, which means that you can join a squad, you can join a team to help IBM, to help us together to really address the issues, not only within IBM, but externally in society, and tell us what you want us to do and use in our brand to really make a meaningful, long-lasting change. So, I recommend employees really look at all of the different avenues. There are so many things for which you can show up with your BRG communities. You can show up to these town halls. And I encourage leaders, as Cynthia stated, we spent a lot of time with our leaders to really take a step back, to be more observant, to have more awareness, to listen more. And when you see that person that may be struggling, that may seem disengaged, to take a moment to ask them their opinion in a meeting, in a team meeting, to ask them, do they have something that they would like to add? And so those are ways in which we're ensuring that. And we're ensuring this with our younger generation through mentoring and engagement. So almost like a 2 in a box, where not only do you have a coach or a leader you may report to, but you can actually have, if you want, a mentor that looks like you, or a mentor in a particular area that you have interest that you want to grow in. And so we're really providing, and we want to do this transparently, ways in which employees can become more and more engaged. And then Derek, the last point, just to kind of wrap up on what Cynthia and Sandra talked about, I believe our corporations have such an important role in making meaningful change. It is so critical that we do things together, and we are doing things together. We have 110 that we're doing with Bank of America that's going to be around 37 companies creating 1 million jobs in the next decade for Black Americans. I mean, this is a way in which we could drive through these 1 million jobs, the lives of 1 million people and their families, right? And so those are ways in which we can help. Also policy advocacy. So these companies, as well as others, we're doing this together through the Business Roundtable and other types of settings where you bring the weight and the brand of many companies together to really go and work with our Congress, our Senate, our caucuses, and the Office of the President to really drive what we believe are the important issues for change, for meaningful, long-lasting change, and we're doing that. And we do these, what we call our legislative fly-ins. We used to do them face-to-face. We're calling them our virtual fly-ins. We've met with each and every Black congressional or senatorial senator, either their office or with them directly, to really talk about our agenda with the BRT and our agenda as IBM and what we can do and what they would like us to do in their districts or in their states. And so I just think it has to be more holistic for it to really to be long-lasting change.
We've unpacked a lot of information in this session. Actually, it's been very helpful and very expansive in terms of what your individual companies are doing, as well as the influence that you're creating within the industry and the nation. Just like to, have each of you provide one quick takeaway, a minute just to say one statement that you would like to share with our audience that you haven't shared during this roundtable. Carla, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would just say, look, I think that 2020 has taught us that action is really, really critical. Transparency, action, progress now equals trust, right? I really believe that that is the critical moment that we're in this diversity and inclusive space. And the workforce really, really doesn't want their employers to look at them as employees or workers, but as people. So we have to really treat them with respect as people. And that means enabling an inclusive culture and advocating for equity, not only inside of IBM and our companies, but also outside in the world and for society to be better. So that's really kind of my takeaway for your listeners today.
Thank you, Carla. Cynthia? Any last comments?
I would say that it is really important to have clear priorities, particularly in this moment, and to partner more broadly so that we collectively drive greater change. We've always been focused on the representation of our people. I said earlier, our goal is to look like the world we live in, where 50% of our management team is diverse, 32% of our management team are women, 50% of our workforce are women, 45% of our workforce are people of color. 6 members of our board are women, 2 members are African American, 1 is Hispanic Latino. It's important just not only to talk the talk, but to walk the walk. And I think we do that through transparency. I think we do that through holding ourselves accountable for results. And I think that we do that by partnering with incredible organizations like the 2 that are on here today, because I think collectively we as organizations can help drive change. But I also think it comes down to individuals, all individuals, regardless of race. And even if things aren't impacting you directly, they're impacting you indirectly. And we need everyone to have a voice and break the silence.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sandra?
What I would say, Derek, is that I think focusing on inclusion is critical. Companies have an ecosystem and not everybody's in the same place. You have to create spaces for people to speak their truths. And you've got to find ways to focus on the common ground and the ways in which we all can move forward together as a company. It's sometimes easy to spot the issues that impact one group or another. But when I think of allyship, this is a perfect time for everyone of all races and genders and cultures and religious backgrounds to come together and move towards a common goal. So my learning is inclusion is critical. hearing different voices is critical, and finding safe places and common ground where we can learn and be educated and move forward on trying to, eradicate some of the things that have plagued our country for too long. It's going to take all of us to do that. So that would be the message that I would like to leave. And one on an optimistic one is for the listeners to this particular program. The time is now. Prepare yourself for greater things, because since I've been at this, for a number of years, I don't think I've been as optimistic as I am now about what the future holds, and even the present, in terms of making diversity, equity, and inclusion a real reality in corporate America.
Well, thanks all of you for your views, your insight, this conversation. And I know that you will continue to move your organizations forward and help move this corporate America forward and the world as well. Thank you for being a part of our DEI Summit and kicking it off. And we look forward to following up with you in the future in terms of seeing if all that we discussed and the direction that we're going in terms of DE&I will be lasting and realized. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra, Cynthia, Carla, thank you for an amazing roundtable. You've enlightened our audience and helped push forward the DEI agenda for corporate America and the world.